That's going to have some implications for the abortion debate. But, and here's the other key thing, it's not going to settle it, not by a long shot, because, and this is the sort of important point, scientific facts cannot settle moral debates. They can inform moral debates, but they cannot settle moral debates. So we should take this information as something to chew on, but then we have to do a little bit of philosophy. So the abortion issue will not be settled scientifically. It has to be settled philosophically. So you're probably also familiar again with the idea that it's a scientific fact that a fetus is a genetically distinct being, genetically distinct from either of its two parents. That's an important and relevant fact too, but that fact also doesn't settle the abortion debate as much as some people might like to believe it does. So generally speaking, what philosophers do here is they make a distinction between human and person. Human is a biological category. That is something that is determined in a purely scientific fashion. No moral judgments, no moral values, done entirely on the basis of genetics. Nothing special or unique done there. Person, by contrast, is a moral category. Now, obviously, there's going to be considerable overlap between humans and persons. In the very least, the vast majority of humans are persons. But it's not clear that all humans are persons. And it's also pretty clear that at least some non-humans are going to be persons too. Just to take example, probably the higher apes most likely can be classified as persons because they have many of the morally relevant criteria that I'll turn to in just a minute. But if you don't buy apes, then extraterrestrials, super intelligent extraterrestrials. They'd be just like us in every way. They would have moral status. We would call them persons, even though they're not genetically human. So with that in mind, I want to turn to another philosopher by the name of Marianne Warren, who I think informs the personhood debate in a very interesting way. How can we come up with criteria that will allow us to distinguish what counts as a person? That's the question she wants to ask. And so what she comes up with is the following. She says, let's imagine that we are space explorers, that we go to an alien planet and we find alien beings. Now, what do we need to know about these alien beings before we can decide whether we should A, respect their rights the way we respect human rights, or B, kill them and eat them the way we kill and eat plants? This is something we obviously want to get right. We don't want to kill and eat these beings if they are, for lack of a better word, like us. If they have all sorts of characteristics that we have. So what would we have to know about these beings before we could decide whether or not to kill and eat them or whether or not to treat them with respect? Now, Warren's list, which is by no means authoritative, every item on this list is debatable, but I just wanted to give a suggestion of how you might go about doing this. This is what she comes up with. She says we would look for consciousness, we'd look for the capacity to feel pain, the capacity to reason, self-motivated activity, the capacity to communicate, and self-awareness. Now, it's pretty clear that very early fetuses have none of these things. So fertilized eggs lack all of these things. It's also pretty clear that late-term fetuses have most, if not all, of these things. So for Warren, precisely what stage in development you're at is going to have a huge difference. And that's part of the reason why I bothered detailing a lot of what I did about fetal development. So shifting away from the conceptual debate about what does it mean to be a person and moving on to the moral debate about abortion. Probably the most single influential article on what's traditionally called the pro-life side of this argument comes from the philosopher Don Marquis. Marquis argues that pain and consciousness are irrelevant, as are all the other items on Warren's list. None of that stuff makes a difference, ultimately, to determining whether or not abortion is right or wrong. If you want to know whether or not abortion is right or wrong, all we have to ask is the question whether or not the fetus is like us, in the sense that, it's wrong to kill you. It would be wrong if I were to stab you. It would be wrong if you were to shoot me. Both of those things would be wrong. Why is it wrong to kill you? Why is it wrong to kill me? What is it that we have that makes it wrong? And his answer to this is that both of us have a future of value. When you kill me, I'll quote Marquis directly here, the loss of one's life deprives one of all the experiences, activities, projects, and enjoyments that would otherwise have constituted one's future. I have a valuable future. If you kill me now, you deprive me of that future. That's equally true of me as it is of a fetus. as it is of a brand new fertilized egg. When you destroy a fertilized egg, you deprive it of its future of value. That's what makes killing me wrong. That's what makes killing the fetus wrong. And this account is very powerful. It explains, for example, why we think of killing as being the worst sort of crime. You know, it's not just a bad crime among others. It tends to be the worst sort of crime, because you're not just depriving them of something, you're depriving them of everything. It also explains why we think dying is bad, why we think it's a tragedy if someone were to die prematurely, before they had so much life to live. Why is that such a bad thing? Well, because they're losing all that future of value. On the other side of the moral debate comes the philosopher Judith Jarvis Thomson, who wrote one of the most influential articles on the topic of abortion in the last 40 years or so. Thomson takes for granted her opponent's principal supposition, the idea that the fetus is a person. She says, okay, I'll assume that for the sake of argument. From the moment of conception, it's a person. I'll grant you that. What's supposed to follow precisely? How exactly does it follow from that therefore abortion is supposed to be impermissible? She says, even if the fetus is a person, abortion is permissible because no person has the right to use another person's body against their will. So to illustrate this fact, she came up with a very famous thought experiment called the violinist thought experiment. And here's how the violinist thought experiment works. You find yourself in a hospital bed. You wake up and you've been drugged and hooked up surgically to a world-famous violinist. This violinist has a very rare blood type, and you're the only person in the area whose blood type matched. And so the Society for Music Lovers has kidnapped you because this violinist's kidneys are failing. And they've hooked you and your kidneys up to this violinist. They've done this against your will. They did not consult you. They kidnapped you and they hooked you up. And the doctors come to you and say, look, we're very sorry about this. If we knew this was going to happen, we would have stopped the Society for Music Lovers from doing this. But now you're hooked up to this violinist. This violinist is a person. This person has a right to life. If you were to unhook yourself, you would be killing the violinist. That means that you are morally obliged to stay hooked up to this fetus, to this violinist. Whether that's for the next 9 months or the next 9 years. You know, that's what the sort of the extreme position on the right to life is going to commit you to, that you are morally obliged to stay hooked up. Thomson does not think you are morally obliged to stay hooked up. Despite the fact that the violinist is a person and they have a right to life, that doesn't override your right to control your body. So from Thomson's point of view, the issue of whether or not the fetus is a person is irrelevant. You can grant that assumption and abortion is still morally permissible. Now, again, this is a very brief sketch of a lot of material, a lot of information. Every single one of these arguments can be challenged and challenged for good reason, and if you want to do that, by all means, feel free to hit me with them when we get to the question and answer session. But in closing, I want to say that the abortion debate is very, very complex. It's not something that we can sort of settle easily. We should resist simplistic bumper sticker arguments and recognize that full, robust moral debate has to happen. We should also resist extreme all-or-nothing positions on both sides, because abortion is not a black and white issue. Many moral values of legitimate, but unfortunately sometimes competing interests are at play here. The scientific and medical facts about abortion matter, but they do not solve the issue. Philosophical and moral debates informed by those facts need to occur if we are going to reach at least tentative conclusions. Thank you very much.